My friend's fiance drunkenly confessed to worshipping the maid-of-honour's toes. So we made the truth stomped out, and our friend made his life a totally hot mess. Final updates. Update 4 3 months later. So, Patrick is on a downward spiral, but we can't figure out if it's due to an obsession with wanting to get back with Summer, or if he's obsessed with getting revenge on Twix. Since she started doing voiceover, Twix has traveled a lot for work, but we all video chat often, and whenever she's back in town, she assembles our girl group for brunches, lunches, dinners, and outings. And since Summer and Patrick's break up, when she's in town, Twix spends even more one-on-one time with Summer. Recently our girl group had plans to meet with Summer and Twix for a late lunch at our group's longtime favorite casual dining restaurant after the two had a spa day. They arrived at the restaurant first, and while they had just been seated, one of the ambassadors from Twix's company noticed her on his way out after just finishing lunch with his wife. Before leaving, his wife slipped away to use the restroom, and he slid into the booth beside Twix while waiting. That's when my friend Dee and I walked in. That's also when Patrick and Sean walked in right after us. It sucks that we all still frequent the same places. Patrick looked at me and Dee, scowled, and turned away. Dee and I greeted Sean, and just as we were finishing up our forced pleasantries and turning to walk toward where Twix and Summer were sitting, we heard Patrick exclaim, "What the F?" Dee and I quickly turned to look at him, and then we followed his gaze to see that the man sitting beside Twix was talking to Summer, who was across from him. They were leaning toward each other, and he had said something that made Summer laugh. Now, Dee and I got the details later about the fact that he and Summer had just met and that the man's wife was in the restroom. We even met his wife when she came out, but at that moment, from where we stood, even with Twix there, it was a cozy scene that could easily have been mistaken for a date. But, after Patrick's outburst, the three of them in the booth stopped talking, as did most everyone else in the restaurant, and turned to look toward the noise. Patrick began to storm over to them, yelling, "Seriously? You're on a effing date?" Sean caught up to him in a few strides and stepped in front of him, telling him to calm down and blocking him from walking any further. But Patrick, who is shorter than Sean, was practically on his tiptoes to yell over Sean's shoulder in Summer's direction. "Is that what all your little girl day lunches have been? These hens setting you up on secret dates?" Sean was blocking him, but security still came over and told Sean that he would have to take his friend outside. Dee and I had rushed over to the booth by then, taken our seats, and were sitting there in shock as we watched Patrick's behavior. As Sean and the two security guards were all physically pulling Patrick to the exit, he was resisting and still yelling in our direction. "I'm not surprised Twix is the matchmaker, you meddling foot freak beach." Just then, our other three girlfriends arrived, their eyes popping open. They witnessed Patrick yelling obscenities and being tossed out of the restaurant by two security guards and Sean walking out behind them. Fast forward to later that same night, I get a call around 11:15 p.m., and it's a group video call with all the girls already on the call. I had missed 3 previous calls from them because I was in the bubble bath. When I joined the call, Twix told us that her old neighbor, let's call her Jane, who still has Twix's number, called her to say that a man in a hoodie slipped a note under the door of her old apartment. He had kept his head down and turned away to avoid the camera in front of the apartment door. But he didn't realize that by looking the other way, he was looking straight into Jane's Ring camera on her apartment door, directly across the hallway. Since Twix had moved out of that building well over a year ago, shortly after returning home, the new woman who now lives there knocked frantically on Jane's door, presented the note, and asked if Jane had seen who slipped it under her door. After reading the note, Jane remembered that Twix, the previous tenant, was a foot model, and then she checked her Ring camera footage. After thinking she recognized the man as part of the friend group from Twix's many dinner parties when she lived there, Jane told the woman that she believed the note was meant for the previous tenant. Neither of the women was sure how he had gotten past the locked door in the lobby, but they called the police to report him. While the police were there, Jane called Twix to send her the video footage and a picture of the typed note and to ask if the man in the video was one of the people in her friend's circle. Twix told us that after she watched the video footage, she sang like a canary. She texted Jane a photo of Patrick, which confirmed that it was him in the video, and then Twix gave the police Patrick's full name, number, and address for his parents' home, where he currently resides in their guest house. Patrick didn't answer his phone when the police called, and the officers told the women they would visit Patrick and issue a warning. The police advised the new tenant not to throw the note away, then told both of the women that if Patrick came back, to call them, and then left, as there was nothing further they could do. Twix forwarded the video footage and the picture of the note to our group chat. The next day, the police informed the new tenant, who told her neighbor Jane, who then told Twix that after the officers left their building, they went to his place. Still, Patrick wasn't home and didn't return home in the 90 minutes that the officers supposedly waited around. The police also questioned his neighbors, who had told the officers that the homeowners, Patrick's parents, wouldn't be back from a trip abroad for another week. 2 days later we all had dinner at her penthouse and got the update about the police visit to Patrick's home from Twix. She tried to lighten the mood by joking that Patrick should have saved both a tree and ink and sent his note as an email attachment instead of printing it out, but the mood was still tense, and we all voiced concerns about how worried we were that Patrick was trying to scare her. Twix just laughed, and said that she'd spare us the details, but after her bodyguards had a chat with him, she was certain that Patrick would not pull a stunt like that again. Her agent had long since assigned a driver and bodyguards to Twix to accompany her from her home, to jobs and certain events and then back home again. Everyone in our group, including Patrick, knows this. Also, when we checked online later that night, the old foot content that was taken from the Twix Raven website, compiled into a twisted, smut-looking video, and posted to Twitter/X was deleted, and the account had suddenly mysteriously disappeared from the platform. And just when I thought Patrick couldn't spiral any lower, about a week later, he proved he could. He'd been chatting with a woman he met on a foot fetish website and arranged for her to meet up at his house. The woman had shown up with two men, who hid off to the side, and they jumped him when he opened the door. Patrick was beaten and knocked unconscious, and his home was robbed. He woke up face down on the floor to the sounds of his mother screaming. And even though his father helped him sit up, he still hadn't fully regained consciousness before the police and paramedics were there questioning him. He reluctantly had to confess to his parents and to the police that he had invited a woman he met online over to his home, who showed up with two men. Patrick was taken to the hospital to be checked out and had to answer even more questions from the police. He spent 2 days in the hospital for a concussion and a cracked rib, and got stitches on his cheek and forehead. Sean got a call from Patrick once he was stitched up, and settled into a bed, and he visited him in the hospital. At the hospital, while Patrick didn't give him full details initially, over the 2 days that he was there visiting, Sean learned the whole story with each police visit to Patrick's room, through the questions and answers between him and the officers. Sean told Ken each bit of the story as he learned it, and Ken then told us. On the first day of Patrick's hospital stay, when we all heard the news, I asked my boyfriend Blake if he wanted to go see Patrick in the hospital, and he said that he did not. But both he and Summer did call Patrick's mother to see how she and Patrick were holding up. Blake's conversation with his aunt, Patrick's mother, was short. Still, she reassured him that Patrick would live, if she didn't kill him first, and about her plans to upgrade the security system around the perimeter of their estate to eliminate camera blind spots. However, Patrick's mother's conversation with Summer lasted well over an hour. During their talk she told Summer that as soon as he's released from the hospital, she plans on informing Patrick that since his porn addiction was causing him to make reckless decisions, like inviting unsavory characters to her home, he will no longer be permitted to live there. Sean later told Ken, since he was the one that picked Patrick up from the hospital and drove him to his place, where Patrick now lives, that Patrick's argument to try to get his mother to allow him to continue living in her guest house was that they only robbed the guest house where he lived, not the main house where she lives. Even Sean thought Patrick's argument and his lack of an apology were pathetic. Sean also said he didn't know what Twix bodyguards did or said to him, but he stated that Patrick is properly scared even to mention Twix's name now. I think it's probably the trauma from the robbery that has him proper scared, since our entire group has met Twix's bodyguards on many occasions. Though they're beefy, they're quite jovial. One of them even makes homemade jam. Blake, who has also met them, thinks the guards are only jovial until someone becomes a perceived threat like Patrick did. As we go over the details, through the group grapevine, of all the events leading up to this point, me, Blake, Ken and the guys, Dee, the other girls, and even Sean, we all can't help but wonder, just which woman is Patrick fixated on? Summer or Twix? He did fly into a rage when he thought Summer was on a date with another man, but it was Twix's house that his rage drove him to visit afterward, or to where he thought was Twix's house. According to poor Summer, everything that has to do with Patrick is a nightmare that just keeps giving. The company Twix works for hosts seasonal tours worldwide, so she'll soon be jetting off for their winter tour. Since Summer works remotely, Twix invites her to go along so that she can escape all this Patrick nonsense for a while. We're all excited for Summer to go, and really think time away will do her good. Plus, not too long after they return from the winter tour in February, it will be time for our planned girls' trip in the spring. And after our trip, we all plan to dive into the distractions of wedding planning with Dee, for her upcoming wedding to Ken in May 2026.